Lord.
Welcome to our November 2025 episode of Calm in the Chaos. I'm Michele Badie.
And I'm Valerie Carmel.
Thank you so much for tuning in or catching the replay. However you're joining us, thank you so much. We're happy that you're here. We're happy that you're taking the time to take a break to focus on your mental health. So hopefully this will be an engaging conversation for you and you have some takeaways or at least some friendly reminders that you might not think about on a regular basis.
Definitely. And today's episode is about the power of the pause.
About who are you? Tell them who you are. We might have
Oh,
someone new watching.
oh, that's so true. Yes. Hi, I'm Valerie Carmel. I'm a licensed therapist and corporate wellness strategist.
Fantastic.
So today we're talking about power of the pause and how to recharge in busy seasons. And ultimately, I feel like people are already starting to feel the increase in intensity as we are approaching the end of the year and the holidays. So, the key thing has been, what do we actually do to really manage how we are feeling in the midst of all of this chaos that seems to be, directly tied to what's been going on. So for you, let's start off with like an experience. Can you share a moment with me, like when you realized that pause, which at times can for certain people feel like a distraction or move away from the productivity that we're actually seeking, where you notice that it's probably cost you more time and energy or maybe a little bit of sanity because you didn't end up taking the break that you actually needed?
I think that happens a lot during quarter 4 because
Mm-hmm.
people are wrapping up. And I would say the window leading up to Thanksgiving, right? I think there's a time like October, early October, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
mid-October, there's this like switch that goes on mentally. Oh my goodness, Thanksgiving's right around the corner. Actually, it's 4 weeks away. And then you're realizing that you have these deadlines that you need to meet, but you realize the PTO ticker is going to go up, right? So people that might not be available, end of year fog, brain fog, I call it end of year fog, start settling in. People are like, oh, I'm going to, take this trip. I'm going to do this for the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you're having like what some might feel like is a Scooby-Doo moment, like, oh, like, here we go. Let's figure this out type of thing. So I think that comes into play. That is like can be a undercurrent for Q4. And then the pause piece can come in when you're navigating that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a project management professional, program management professional, you are a planner, right? Hands down, you're a planner. But I think sometimes we can get in our own ways. And when I say that, I mean, we forget sometimes we have a timeline in place. And
Mm-hmm.
so, with you having timelines in place, with you having checks and balances in place, with you having your stand ups in place, you might be able to step back, for whatever you need, a break, an afternoon, or a longer lunch, to take a pause or maybe even take a day off because you are following the systems that you have implemented and created. And sometimes we sometimes might perceive the systems to be for other people, but they can actually help us establish our boundaries, right? And what does that look
Totally.
like? And be favorable for us, which I think is excellent.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think for me, I actually had that moment earlier this week where I looked at the calendar and I was like, I don't have any patience on Thursday of next week. I was like, what's up with that? And then I looked and I was like, oh, because it's Thanksgiving. Um, terrible at like the idea of where, and I felt a couple weeks ago like, oh, Thanksgiving is in 3-4 weeks, and then all of a sudden I looked and it was right here. And I think that is such a common experience in a lot of ways, in which we're so focused on the tasks that we're very deeply rooted in, achieving and working through, that intermittently those moments of pause become less and less, because there's a little bit of a level of intensity attached to the completion of said thing and trying to get to the holiday or that particular deliverable, or I need to get all of this in because maybe one of the most important people that you needed is going to be on vacation, right? And not going to be available. And so that really can definitely switch and intensify the level of pressure that you feel, which is oftentimes not the time that people think that they need a pause, but neurologically you do. So our behaviors sometimes don't always match what our brain actually needs.
For sure. For sure. I mean, it's just a work in progress, and recognizing that. So what are some things when we talk about the pause, what does that actually mean for our nervous system?
Yeah. I think in a lot of one of the things in those moments, our nervous system goes through periods of basically an activation period and a recovery period. So just like a project manager, when you are working towards a particular goal, there are different phases, right? There's, the initiation phase, there's a planning phase, there's execution, closing, and in a lot of ways, a retro at the end of that particular cycle would be very similar to your body's or your brain's period of recovery. And so when you are in the planning execution phase, from a neurological standpoint, you're actually in an activation phase. This is the period where your brain is focused on mobilization, and that could be through attending to meetings, trying to get deliverables done, planning, strategizing, utilizing a lot of your frontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles a lot of the complex cognitive processes. And over time, that gets depleted, right? You can't, it's like driving a car, whether you are, you know, charging it or putting gas in it, at some point you need to refuel it, right? And so if you are working consistently on a particular task, your brain is in activation. And then when you're done with that task, you need to switch to recovery phase. And if in the car example, we're, charging it up or adding more gas to it, from a biological human standpoint, we need recovery, which often comes in either stillness and rest. And that particular phase is the phase that is really important in fueling the activation phase again.
I love that. So let's get tactical, Val. What are 3 micro breaks, or let's just say emotional resets, that someone can implement, throughout managing a project?
Sure. Easiest thing, we do it all the time, breathing. Easiest, most accessible to us in any given space is to breathe. My favorite is the physiological sigh, in which you do 2 really quick, short inhales and then a long exhale. So that moment in and of itself helps to send the signal from your body to your brain that you want it to calm down. The activation of our sympathetic nervous system, the thing that says, okay, we need to go, 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 and stay mobilized, you want it to actually calm down. And so you slowing down your breathing helps your brain to really understand that cue and begin to reduce cortisol levels, which is the hormone, the stress hormone, as well as helping you to effectively get more clarity. The next thing that you can do really quickly is move your body. So naturally, when we are in a state of activation, our body wants to mobilize, right? It's fight or flight, right? And so the best way to help your body kind of close out that is to give it what it needs, which is mobilization. And that can be done by getting up, moving your arms bilaterally. You can go for a quick walk, you can stretch. It's just allowing you to really be intentional about giving your body what it needs to kind of close out that cycle from activation to recovery. And then the other thing that you can do in a matter of, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, you can do some sensory grounding. So, one of my favorite things to have people do is you remember played I Spy when you were a kid?
Mm-hmm.
Do I Spy with your senses. So you go through 5 things you can see. You can go then do 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can still taste, 2 things you can touch, and then 1 thing you can feel or hear, whichever one of the senses that I couldn't remember and kind of blanked out on. So going through that, that's extremely grounding, because one of the things that continues to activate us are our own thoughts. So we're constantly planning, problem solving, thinking, explore. Like, our brain doesn't necessarily stop, and we constantly have so many tabs open. And so the sensory grounding of that particular activity helps you shift your brain away from all of that noise and chatter into being more present into the moment, which gives your brain a time of like, woosah, we can just focus on what's happening right now and not be so focused about the next thing. And that can really provide us with a little bit more capacity building in that moment.
For sure. For sure.
So, for you, when we're talking about recovery in this concept of actively in a project, and you're having to contend with timelines and particular stakeholders, what does that look like when maybe people are kind of pushing for the go faster delivery pace of things, when you're kind of noticing maybe you need some downtime? So how do you build that into the overall process and timeline?
For me, it's maximizing your one-on-one with your leadership or with
Mm-hmm.
your team meetings. And that should be a place where you can, for sake of conversation, let your hair down, be a little vulnerable, and be transparent more than anything else, right? So in that time, I feel that's where you can assess approaches and strategies. That's where you can ask for help. That's
Mm-hmm.
also where you can see if there's like a partnership that can take place. You can assess timelines to see if something can be pushed out or it can be reassigned to someone else. Because one thing when you're managing programs versus managing projects, you have to realize your what your role is, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it is very deeply tactical and you're hands-on, and sometimes it's consultative and supervisory, and you're just shedding light. You sometimes hear on those podcasts I talk about, as program and project managers, depending on your role, you have a flashlight and you're just showing areas that, hey, we need to focus on this. Hey, we need to focus on that. Sometimes that's all you need to do,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding you're just shedding light. And then sometimes you do need to get into and get, be boots to the ground and make sure, help with the follow-ups and make sure things are accurate and things of that nature. It just depends on what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what your role is and how you can ask for help and what does that look like. But I think the main thing is being transparent and be willing to ask for help and not feel like that's something for you to take on as a whole. And I think that's something that's very, no matter where you are in your career as a project management professional, if you're new or if you're seasoned, I do think that's always an ongoing area of growth because you're constantly interacting and encountering dynamic situations, strategies, stakeholders that you have not encountered before. As you know, every project is something new.
Mm-hmm.
Every program is something new. So I think sometimes you just have to remind yourself that I need to ask for help. And in saying that, it's like I'm at capacity. it's a great time to learn from your your peers, excuse me, if they've had similar situations, right? And you realize that you most likely are not the only person that have been through something similar to that or exact as that. And you can learn from their lessons learned, and you can go through archives and just see what can be implemented, what can help you make the workload more manageable than what you are currently experiencing. All that centered around asking for help, though,
Mm-hmm.
being
Mm-hmm.
transparent enough. And I also think that that demonstrates confidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Absolutely.
leaders know how to ask for help. They realize that they're not the only person carrying a torch. So I think it's a great demonstration of leadership and accountability, without, as long as you're not saying, take this over for me, it can be favorable.
Yeah. I think one of the things you mentioned here that I think is really important is the idea that each project is new, right? There are going to be some new elements to every single thing that you do. And in a lot of ways, that newness for certain people, and depending in the extent of the newness, right, can really trigger a lot of stress in our minds and our bodies, because we're like, okay, we knew how to do A, B, and C, but now we have D, F, and K, and I don't necessarily know exactly how to navigate through that as
Yeah,
effectively. And that can create, in and of itself, an additional layer of stress, which can oftentimes push a level of intensity in the task that you're trying to get completed. And I think that pause, very intentionally incorporated in the process, allows you to really ground yourself, but also reassess which areas are familiar within the thing that is new. And that can be a really calming and grounding force throughout the phase of the project.
for sure. For sure. So Val, when you're working with your project management teams and individuals that work in the industry, how do you encourage them to slow down without losing momentum? Let's like expand that part of the conversation.
Definitely. I think the biggest thing is people's conception about rest, right? And slowing down. I think oftentimes people equate slowing down to stopping, and that ultimately creates a new level of pressure that if they slow down, there's going to be something they're losing out on, right? And often I have to help people reframe the concept of rest and seeing
Mhm.
rest as a natural part of productivity. Nothing that we have created, whether it's a website, whether it's our phones, nothing that we have that we utilize doesn't have a period of downtime, right? And while we understand that our phones need updating, our cars maybe need charging, um, our even my garden, like there are periods of time I have to go in and do some maintenance. I gotta pull weeds and water things. So everything in life needs a period of recovery. And so I think the first step is helping people to reframe their concept of what rest and recovery actively looks like, and recognizing that rest and recovery is a part of productivity. It isn't that because you are resting and you're incorporating stillness and time to reflect, that means that nothing is being done. On the contrary, there's lots of things that are being done. It is often in our periods of time and rest and recovery that we are consolidating things that we have learned. We're able to really integrate and synthesize information more cognitively. So even though it may look like you're doing nothing, right? There is a lot of internal, invisible work that is occurring when we are practicing stillness and engaging in rest and recovery. And I think being able to teach people a different alternative to that and shifting their perspective makes them a lot more open to engaging in that practice. Another way that I usually utilize that is talk about sports. First of all, I'm not a big sports person, but one of the things I do know when I'm watching, elite athletes, they spend as much time and money into their building and strengthening as they do in their recovery, because they have a
Mhm.
full understanding that in order for them to well, regardless of the sport, football, basketball, hockey, doesn't matter. They understand that they have to allow their bodies to recover. And as project managers, your sport is cognitive processing. You guys do a lot of thinking, a lot of planning, a lot of connecting, and all of that is work. So, got to kind of treat your body and your mind like the elite athlete it effectively is.
For sure. I love that analogy. And I like watching sports documentaries.
Oh
So
my gosh, one of my favorite things,
really do enjoy watching
especially on
sports
ESPN,
documentaries.
like the 30 by like I think it's 30 for 30 or whatever. I think they've had like multiple segments of sport documentaries. Amazing. And I think that there's so much that we can learn from other domains that may not necessarily be absolutely aligned with our domain, right? I clearly at 4'11 have nothing in
Oh, Lord.
you know, I'm nothing like LeBron James, right? Like, definitely we are a shark and a bunny. Like, we could not be any different. However, when it comes to, things like commitment and dedication and importance of working on a team and leading a team, there are some absolutely parallel experiences that can come across in that.
I totally agree. I
So,
agree. So let's talk about culture shifts a little bit.
sure,
So
I
from
like
your culture shifts, I feel, project management is constant. We are change, we drive change and transformation. So we're constantly driving culture shifts. And it is definitely the cartoon where they're pulling and it's like a whole 100-pound weight behind them.
that. Yes,
It can sometimes feel like that.
absolutely.
Not all the time,
Absolutely.
but sometimes, maybe more than some might want to acknowledge. It can feel like a huge weight, even though it's great. Like you're walking to the sun, you see the paradise ahead of you, all the whatever amazingness you want to like put in the blank. But
Hmm.
it takes time. That's why I also always say that we're running a marathon. We are marathon runners. We are not sprinters. Even if you have sprints and all that, they are a part of a long race.
Preparation, of the long haul, for certain, for certain.
Oh my goodness, it's a thing. So from a mental health perspective, what makes intentional recovery a leadership strategy rather than personal wellness practice?
Oh, I love that question. Um, I think one of the ways to really understand that this is a leadership strategy is that is when you begin to understand that your nervous system and how you show up actually impacts the tone for the room. So have you ever been in a meeting and like a major change has happened and you can see in the leader that they are frazzled? They look nervous. And even though the words that are coming out of their mouths are trying to be very reassuring and grounding, you're like, mm-mm. This doesn't feel right. And so, and that is the reason behind why recovery is absolutely a leadership strategy. Because when you can take a few moments to ground yourself and really align yourself with how the level of calm you want to actually experience, that's going to come across in the way that you walk into the room. That's one. The number two, the other thing that it's going to do, it's going to help people co-regulate. So this is something that therapists often do. So if I'm in a session and someone is very elevated, right? And if somebody's elevated about whatever it is they're talking about, oftentimes people are very pressured in the way that they speak, like very rapid words coming out like word vomit, right? And so typically what I will do is that when I'm talking with them, I actually gradually begin to slow down my pace and how I'm talking. And what that does is that we have mirror neurons that naturally begin to mirror the thing that we're seeing. So as I slow down my pace in the way that I talk, they also gradually slow down the pace in the pace that they talk. And that is part of you being able to lead very effectively when you're walking into a room. So it allows you to really kind of create the environment that you want simply by your presence. And that in and of itself is leadership.
What does the young generation say? Clock it.
Right? Like that's
I
a thing.
mean, the gems, the
Right?
gem that is. It's
Like
like
you want to
totally.
be you want to be able to convey that, right, and demonstrate that in spaces, because what that does is that when we are in a calmer state, we tend to make better decisions, and we make better decisions because we're able to think more long term. When you are really elevated, you're not thinking about a year from now, 6 months from now. You're thinking about right now. And so you'll make decisions from that very limited viewpoint, right? That is more short term versus long term. And that's what you want a leader to be able to do. Think about the long term. So I think in the concept of when you're working on, working in teams and people are maybe still somewhat resistant, right? To
Yeah.
kind of be very intentional in normalizing that. Like, how do you work through that as a project manager within your teams?
The first thing that comes to mind is take a breath. Because when
Brief.
you see it occurring in front of you, the spidey senses can be like, what is happening? Especially if it's an ongoing conversation, if it's an ongoing revelation, right? And it's like, I thought we had the buy-in, like we need to see progress. I thought we were in a different stage. I didn't think we were still here. So we are not in this, we might be in the same book and we might be on the same page, but we are definitely not on the same line. So what does that look like, right? And so when you're having that moment, I feel like a lot of times we are the ducks. Our feet are like underwater,
Going.
right? But we're just like, like, what? Okay, can you please tell me your perception of what this previous conversation was? Whatever your vernacular is with that. But in essence, that's what you're asking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say get clarity after you breathe, focus on clarity, right? And then assess, which is also a companion to assess your communication. Was
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm-hmm.
clear? Did you ask the question in a way that it aligned with the intent of the question? Project and program managers, we are storytellers. So did you tell the story in a way that it really did have the ending that you wanted it to have? Because that's not what's coming back. So you got to go back and assess your communication when you're getting the clarity, right? And then whether they got it or not, you cannot make them feel some kind of way. This is not a moment to shame somebody. This is not a shame game. It is, how can I
Absolutely.
communicate with you better? Can you educate me on, how did you have that takeaway? Like, in every conversation we have almost is an opportunity to collaborate. It's an opportunity to build trust. It's an opportunity to know that you see that person. So we can't do the subtle shame game. We can't, have this tone of disgust. It's not favorable. Now it's a breath of, okay, I'm just taking in this moment. Or you might want to say, can we take, if you need a moment, say, like, you can let it go. That's something that you can take back to your one-on-one and with your team and say, hey, this is
Mm-hmm.
what happened. What is your takeaway with this? And then schedule time
Mm-hmm.
later or bring it up again in another way. But at all times, you have to keep in mind that the goal is you want to be someone that people want to work with.
Definitely.
So what does that look like?
Yeah. And that looks and what I'm hearing here is it's all about modeling what that actually looks like, right? Like,
which is not always easy.
mm-hmm,
Because to your point, tempers can run if you're dealing with, different um, personalities and temperament, and you might sometimes feel like you're the ring master in a circus, like, okay, how am I going to get all this to come together? But then
mm-hmm,
sometimes it's just good to, like, sometimes it's kind of nice to just let things be for, like, 24 hours and just see what takeaways people come back. You just say, hey, can we just take a moment to reflect on this conversation? And then when we get together tomorrow or later today, can you just share your takeaways? And sometimes that diffuses the situation.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. It ultimately, when it's coming to maybe how you lead, right? Is there for you a particular practice that you consistently do that allows you to really lean into the pause?
Reflection.
Mm,
Reflection is like key for me. I'm constantly assessing, how did this land? Could I have shared this different? What
mhm,
worked? What didn't? Like, reflection slash lessons learned. And that happens in every conversation, right? Because we're
mhm.
always talking to someone that knows something that we don't know, right? So what
Very
does
true.
that look like? Like, I'm always learning from you in conversation. Like, okay, oh, well, I didn't know that, because why? You're the therapist. I'm the program manager. So there's always going to be moments of, oh, what this is a different perspective that I didn't think of. I think that happens a lot. And I think it's important to realize when it does happen, we don't miss it.
Mm, yeah. It's about
We,
making sure that you slow down enough to actually pick up
Mhm.
the gems.
Right. We don't miss it. And that can come when you have your, again, I'm big on team meetings because you need your teams, right? You
Mhm,
need your internal project team. Because sometimes you're dealing with a complex a business partner. Sometimes you're dealing with a stakeholder that hasn't given you all the information and you don't understand the intensity because it hasn't been communicated. Sometimes your internal project team will know something that you don't know, right? Because they're working with that business partner in a different capacity, or they're in a meeting and they heard this and it does impact your
mhm,
project and you don't know that. So it's like the reflection is good. Being willing to ask the questions, being willing to listen to what others are saying, and when they're giving their updates, does that impact you? You never know.
you could. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's such a good point.
So, so maybe the answer to that question should actually be an active listener.
You know, that's I'm always gonna co-sign that. Always gonna
Check.
co-sign active listening. That's for certain.
Check.
I think for me, my pause comes in solitude. Right? Like I spend a lot of
Ooh.
time very forward facing and very engaging, right? From whether I'm giving a training or doing a session or coaching, like there's always that moment. There's each moment that I'm in, it's always I'm very activated, right? I'm always on. And so to help to counterbalance that, right? Because we need to create balance in our bodies, is that I am really intentional about solitude. I need a lot of solitude and I need a lot of silence. Like I spend probably the first hour of every day in quiet. I don't talk to anybody. I don't turn on music. I don't turn on my phone. It's quiet because I know once the day actually begins, I'm gonna, every bit of juice in my in my frontal cortex, I need all of it. I need all
Yeah.
of the cognitive processing. I need all of the memory. I need all of the synapses to be firing as well as they can. And I can't start the day with it being, going from 0 to 100. I need to give her time to like step into and arrive to the moment. And so I really am really intentional about silence and solitude the first part of the day, as well as to close it out, right? Because after I've had multiple sessions and all the things, I recognize I also need to recalibrate after that, right? That's my word.
Yeah.
Give my body time and my mind time to kind of like settle in. So solitude and silence, I think, are my intentional pauses every day.
I love it. So, as we close out this episode, just a final thought. How has building a pause into your own life changed the way you lead, work, and show up for others?
I think it has made me a lot more reflective, a lot more reflective, and also a lot more patient in how I respond. I think, as a person who naturally has, anxiety at baseline and, has suffered from panic attacks in the past, I realize that kind of go, go, go energy may feel like you're going somewhere, but you're low key kind of going nowhere fast because at some point your brain and body will tell you, like, we need to stop. And so that can show up in a lot of different ways depending on who you are. And so me building pauses into my life, one, has allowed me a lot more capacity to show up in a lot more spaces because
Mhm.
I am really strategic about how I dole out my energy, and also really strategic about when I decide I'm not giving it. So I think that has really allowed me to be so much more intentional with how I spend my time and how I'm able to show up. And it really, I think, mirrors for a lot of people how that's even possible, right? I think it sounds good on paper, but I think people struggle to kind of connect this approach with a living, breathing person who's actively doing it.
Mhm.
Right, especially coming off of the heels of like hustle culture, right? I need to be booked and busy. Definitely was part of that. And now I'm like, child, I don't necessarily want to work at that tempo because I recognize it may serve me well in the short term, but not necessarily in the long term. So that for me is how I look at it. How about you?
The pause the intentional pause has made me, I think I've always been in tune to people, in my humble opinion, but I'm
Mhm.
definitely more empathetic
Ooh,
toward people.
I like that.
I'm definitely more empathetic. I'm I don't always go to like, well, this, I'm like, I'm always asking, well, what, how is this impacting you? I'm really concerned about how things impact people, especially in a
Mhm.
professional environment, because you need people to not burn themselves out, right? We really do depend on each
Absolutely.
other. It really is a team dynamic. Collaboration is real. And so you need people to be at their best. If someone is like, you can see someone spinning, right? You need to stop and ask them how they're doing versus, where is your meeting notes for sake of conversation?
Yeah,
They might really
that,
need a moment, and in being empathetic, you realize it's not about you,
I love
right?
that. Like, not personalizing it.
So we know that from personal lives, being in families and friends and chosen families and all the things, and creating a life for yourself. But that does apply to a degree professionally.
That's legit. That's a good point.
It's a
Go ahead.
thing.
Facts.
It's a thing. Well, we do want everyone to know that we are not going to take a break in December. We are going to still come and share some mental health reminders for you next month, December 2025. So we look forward to chatting with you. We look forward to the feedback because I love the DMs that come our way from when we do the replays. So thank you for joining us. We hope that you take time to pause at least once a week. But if you can find a way to create a pause daily, even if it's a 5-minute break, we encourage that.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, guys. We will see you in December.
Thanks.